Jake Morrison stared out the window of the ship called Harmony. Stars looked different here at the edge of space where no human had ever been before. His hands were sweaty inside his dress uniform. In a few hours, he would meet aliens for the first time in human history. "You ready for this, Jake?" Commander Amy Blake walked up behind him. She was his boss and his friend. They had served together in the military before becoming diplomats. "As ready as anyone can be to meet a race that could wipe us out," Jake said. He tried to smile, but it did not work very well. Amy laughed. "That's why they sent you. You always find a way to fix things when they go wrong." Jake had been a combat engineer before joining the diplomatic corps. He was good at solving problems with whatever tools he had. The brass thought this might help when dealing with aliens who had technology far beyond anything humans possessed. The Catharian Empire controlled 12 star systems. Their ships were bigger and faster than anything humans could build. Their weapons could destroy entire planets, but they had agreed to meet with the humans, which gave everyone hope. "Incoming transmission from the Catharian flagship," the communications officer announced. Admiral Ben Carter stepped forward. He was in charge of this mission. "Put it on screen." The image that appeared made everyone on the bridge go quiet. The alien was tall and thin with gray skin that seemed to shimmer. Her eyes were large and completely black. She wore robes that looked like they were made of starlight. "I am Commander Veltar of the Imperial Fleet," the alien said. Her voice was cold and sharp. "You will dock with our station for inspection. Any deviation from our instructions will result in your destruction." "Understood," Admiral Carter replied. "We appreciate the opportunity to meet." The alien's face showed no emotion. "Follow the beacon. Do not touch anything once you dock." The transmission ended. Everyone looked nervous. This was not going well. 2 hours later, their ship approached the Catharian station. It was massive, bigger than any human city. Strange lights moved across its surface in patterns that hurt to look at. "Docking Bay 7 is opening," the pilot announced. "But there's a problem. Their docking clamps don't match our ship's design." Jake moved to the pilot's station and looked at the readings. The Catharian technology was completely different from human systems. Their power levels were too high and their connection ports were the wrong shape. "We can't dock safely," the pilot said. "The power surge could fry our systems." Admiral Carter looked worried. If they could not dock, the meeting would be over before it started. The Catharians would see humans as too primitive to bother with. "Wait," Jake said. He studied the readings more carefully. "I have an idea." He ran to the engineering section and grabbed some spare parts. Working quickly, he built a small device using human components. It was not pretty, but it might work. "This will regulate the power flow," Jake explained as he attached his device to the docking port. "It's like using a step-down transformer. Basic electrical work." The device looked crude compared to the advanced alien technology around them. But when they tried to dock again, it worked perfectly. The connection was smooth and stable. "How did you do that?" Amy asked. "Sometimes simple solutions work better than complex ones," Jake said. "We build redundancy into everything." They seemed to prefer efficiency over adaptability. When they entered the station, Jake was amazed by what he saw. The walls were made of some material that changed color as they walked past. Gravity seemed to shift and flow in ways that should have been impossible. Everything was beautiful and terrible at the same time. A group of Catharian guards escorted them through long corridors. The aliens moved with perfect precision, like they were part of a machine. No one spoke during the long walk. Finally, they reached a huge chamber. At the far end sat a figure on a throne that seemed to be carved from a single crystal. Even from a distance, Jake could feel the power radiating from her. "The Empress," Admiral Carter whispered. Empress Ziravel was taller than the other Catharians. Her skin had a silver sheen and her black eyes seemed to look right through them. She wore a crown that floated above her head without any visible support. "So these are the humans," she said. Her voice filled the entire chamber without any effort. "You are smaller than I expected." Admiral Carter stepped forward and bowed. "Your Imperial Majesty, we come in peace seeking friendship between our peoples." The Empress studied them for a long moment. "Your ship is primitive. Your weapons are crude. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Why should we not simply take what we want from your worlds?" The question hung in the air like a threat. This was the moment that would determine humanity's future. "Because," Jake said, stepping forward, "sometimes the old ways work better." Everyone turned to look at him. Amy's eyes were wide with shock. You did not interrupt an Empress, especially one who could destroy your entire species. But Empress Ziravel seemed interested rather than angry. Explain. Jake pointed to his crude docking device, which was still attached to their ship. Your docking system is perfect for Catharian ships, but it couldn't handle our different design. My simple solution made it work for both of us. The Empress stood up from her throne. Even across the huge chamber, Jake could feel her attention focused on him like a laser. You suggest that primitive methods have value? I suggest that different approaches can solve different problems, Jake replied. Your technology is amazing, but it's specialized. Human technology is adaptable. Maybe together we could solve problems that neither of us could handle alone. For the first time, the Empress smiled. It was not a warm smile. Interesting, she said. I will test this theory. The human called Jake Morrison will remain here as my personal advisor. The rest of you will be housed in our guest quarters. Admiral Carter started to protest, but the Empress raised one hand and he fell silent. This is not a request, she said. Jake felt his heart racing. He had wanted to make a good impression, but this was not what he had in mind. He was now alone among aliens who could kill him with a thought. As the guards led his friends away, Amy caught his eye. Be careful, she mouthed. Jake nodded. He was about to discover just how dangerous it could be to impress an Empress. Jake's room was bigger than his entire apartment back on Earth. The walls showed images of distant worlds and strange creatures. The bed was soft but felt wrong, like it was designed for someone with a different bone structure. Everything reminded him that he was very far from home. A soft chime woke him the next morning. A Catharian servant entered carrying what looked like breakfast. The alien was shorter than the others Jake had seen, with darker gray skin. You are to attend the morning court session, the servant said. The Empress wishes to observe how you handle our daily business. Jake dressed quickly in his uniform. It felt strange to wear human clothes in this alien place. The servant led him through corridors filled with Catharian nobles. They stared at him with their black eyes, whispering in their musical language. The throne room was different in daylight. Huge windows showed the stars beyond, and the crystal throne caught the light and threw rainbows across the floor. Empress Ziravel sat listening to a series of reports from her advisors. The water reclamation system in Sector 7 is operating at only 60% efficiency, one advisor reported. We recommend replacing the entire infrastructure. The Empress nodded. Proceed with the replacement. Cost is irrelevant. Jake watched as similar problems were presented. A broken communications array, a failing power grid, damaged atmospheric processors. Each time the solution was the same. Replace everything with new equipment. When the session ended, the Empress gestured for Jake to approach. You were observing carefully, she said. What did you notice? Jake thought about his answer. These aliens could solve their problems, but they did it by throwing away anything that was not perfect. Your people are very thorough, he said. But? The Empress asked. She seemed to know there was more. On human ships, we fix things instead of replacing them. Sometimes the repaired systems work better than the originals. The Empress studied him with those unreadable black eyes. Show me. She led him to a different part of the station where Catharian engineers were working on a massive machine. Sparks flew from damaged circuits and the air smelled of burning metal. The environmental control system, the Empress explained. It maintains atmosphere and temperature for the entire station. The main processor has failed. A Catharian engineer approached and bowed. Your Majesty, we need 3 days to install a new processor. Until then, we must operate on backup power. 3 days? The Empress asked. What if the backup systems fail? The engineer looked uncomfortable. Then sections of the station would become uninhabitable. We might lose several thousand lives. Jake studied the machine. It was incredibly complex, with components he did not recognize. But the basic principles were the same as any life support system. May I take a look? The engineer seemed shocked that a primitive human would dare to touch their advanced technology. The Empress nodded permission. Jake opened an access panel and examined the circuits inside. The damage was extensive but not complete. On a human ship, they would patch this system and keep it running until they could get proper parts. Do you have any spare components? Jake asked. Only basic maintenance supplies, the engineer replied. Jake smiled. Basic is perfect. He spent the next 4 hours working inside the machine. The Catharian engineers watched in amazement as he rerouted power circuits, bypassed damaged sections, and connected components in ways they had never considered. The work was dirty and difficult. Jake's uniform was soon covered in grease and his hands were cut from handling sharp metal. But slowly the machine began to respond. Power levels are stabilizing, one engineer reported. Atmospheric processing is back to 80% efficiency. How long will this repair last? The Empress asked. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead. Maybe a few months. Maybe a year. It depends on how hard you push the system. And then you fix it again. Or you build something better using what you learned from the breakdown. The Empress was quiet for a long moment. Your people accept imperfection? We expect it, Jake said. Nothing lasts forever. The trick is to keep things working long enough to matter. That evening, Jake was summoned to the Empress's private chambers. The room was smaller than the throne room, but much more comfortable. Real books lined the walls and soft music played from hidden speakers. You saved thousands of lives today, the Empress said. She had changed from her formal robes into something that looked almost casual, almost human. Just doing my job, Jake replied. Your job is to be a diplomat. What you did today was engineering. Jake shrugged. Sometimes they're the same thing, finding ways to make different systems work together. The Empress poured 2 glasses of a liquid that glowed faintly blue. Try this. It's safe for human consumption. The drink tasted like starlight and electricity. Jake felt warmth spread through his chest. My advisors think you're dangerous, the Empress said. Am I? Perhaps. You make me question things I have always believed. She moved closer. Tell me about your home world. Jake described Earth, the blue oceans, the green forests, cities full of people working together to solve problems. He talked about democracy and freedom, about second chances and new beginnings. Your people choose their own leaders? The Empress asked. Every few years. If we don't like how they're doing, we pick someone else. And this works? Usually. Sometimes we make mistakes, but we learn from them. The Empress was quiet for a long time. I have ruled for 300 years. I have never made a mistake. Maybe that's the problem, Jake said, then immediately wondered if he had gone too far. But the Empress laughed. It was a sound like silver bells ringing. You are either very brave or very foolish. Probably both. As the evening continued, Jake began to see past the Empress's cold exterior. She was lonely, he realized. Surrounded by advisors who told her only what she wanted to hear, responsible for billions of lives across 12 star systems. Why did you really ask me to stay? Jake asked. The Empress looked out the window at the stars. Because in 300 years you are the first person to tell me I might be wrong about something. And you did it while saving my people's lives. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the alien air conditioning. This was getting complicated in ways he had not expected. Your Majesty, he began. Ziravel, she corrected. In private you may use my name. Ziravel, I think there are some things we need to discuss. About why humans are really here, and what my people want from this relationship. The Empress smiled again, but this time it was different. Sharper. Oh, Jake Morrison. I know exactly why your people are here. The question is whether you understand why I want you to stay. Before Jake could ask what she meant, a Catharian guard appeared in the doorway. Your Majesty, General Vextar requests an immediate audience. He says it concerns the human prisoner. The warmth vanished from the Empress's face. I will see him now. As they left the private chambers, Jake realized his situation had just become much more dangerous. He was no longer just a diplomat trying to make peace between 2 species. He was a piece in a game he did not understand, played by beings who had been plotting for centuries. And somewhere in the station, General Vextar was making plans that probably did not include keeping Jake alive. General Vextar was everything Jake had expected from a Catharian military officer. Tall, cold, and radiating the kind of controlled violence that made smart people step back. His uniform was covered in symbols that probably meant he had conquered entire worlds. Your Majesty, the general said, bowing precisely, I must speak privately about the human security risk. The Empress gestured toward a side chamber. Jake will join us. His insights may prove valuable. Jake did not miss the flash of anger in the general's black eyes. This was not what Vextar had planned. The side chamber was smaller and darker than the main room. Ancient weapons hung on the walls like museum pieces, except Jake suspected they could still kill him quite effectively. The human has been here 3 days, General Vextar began. He has access to critical systems? observed our military installations, and gained knowledge of our infrastructure weaknesses. He repaired our environmental system, the Empress replied calmly. He saved thousands of lives. He created a dependency on primitive human methods. What happens when his crude repairs fail? Jake started to defend his work, but the Empress held up one hand for silence. General, your concerns are noted, but Jake has proven his value to the Empire. Has he? Vextar's voice became softer, which somehow made it more threatening. Or has he simply convinced you to trust an enemy who studies our defenses while pretending to help? The accusation hung in the air. Jake realized this was about more than military security. This was about the general's own position and power. I think, the Empress said slowly, you forget your place, Vextar. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The general's face went completely blank. Forgive me, Your Majesty. I serve only the Empire's safety. As do I. Jake will continue as my advisor. This discussion is over. General Vextar bowed and left without another word, but his look at Jake promised that this was far from finished. That was interesting, the Empress said once they were alone. He wants me dead, Jake said. Of course he does. You represent change, and Vextar has built his career on keeping things exactly as they are. The Empress moved to the weapons display, but his concerns are not entirely wrong. You have learned a great deal about our capabilities. Jake felt his stomach tighten. Are you having second thoughts about keeping me here? On the contrary. The Empress picked up an ornate blade that glowed with internal light. I want to share much more with you. She set the weapon back in its place and turned to face him directly. Jake Morrison, I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. Join with me. Become my consort and help me create a new dynasty that combines the best of both our species. Jake stared at her. Of all the things he had expected her to say, this was not one of them. Consort, he managed. Catharian royal biology is more complex than human reproduction, the Empress explained. We can adapt our genetic structure to be compatible with other species. The offspring would possess Catharian longevity and mental abilities, combined with human adaptability and innovation. Jake's mind raced. This was not romance. This was selective breeding on an imperial scale. You want to use human genetics to strengthen your bloodline, he said. I want to create children who could rule an empire that spans galaxies, instead of merely star systems. The Empress stepped closer. Consider the possibilities, Jake. Your descendants could live for thousands of years, commanding technology and resources beyond human imagination. And what happens to regular humans in this future? The Empress paused. They would be protected, of course, as valued members of the Empire. Jake caught the slight hesitation. Protected from what? From themselves. From the chaos that comes with unlimited freedom. From the wars and suffering that plague every primitive species. There it was, the truth behind the offer. Humans would be preserved like rare animals in a zoo, while hybrid children ruled over them. I need time to think about this, Jake said. Of course, but not too much time. The Empress's smile was beautiful and terrifying. 3 days, Jake. Give me your answer in 3 days. And if I say no, then you will discover that there are fates worse than death, starting with watching your friends die very slowly. Jake felt cold spread through his chest. This was not a request. It was an ultimatum. I understand, he said. I hope you do. Because I have grown quite fond of you, Jake Morrison. It would sadden me to have to demonstrate the consequences of disappointing an Empress. That night, Jake lay awake, staring at the alien ceiling. The Empress had made her position clear. He could become her consort and help her create a hybrid dynasty, or everyone he cared about would die horribly. But there was something else bothering him. During his time on the station, he had noticed things that did not quite fit together. The way Catharian technology worked was incredibly advanced, but also somehow rigid. Every system connected to every other system in perfect order. It was like the entire empire was one massive machine, with the Empress as the central processor. That made it powerful, but it also made it vulnerable. The next morning brought a message from Amy through a smuggled communication device. His friends were being treated well but were essentially prisoners. More importantly, Dr. Lisa Park had discovered something crucial about Catharian biology. The royal family reproduces rarely, Amy's message said, maybe once every few centuries. When they do, They choose genetic material from the most promising species they encounter. Then they eliminate the source species to prevent competition. Jake deleted the message quickly. So the Empress was not just planning to breed with humans. She was planning to get what she wanted from them and then wipe them out. But she had made one mistake. She had assumed that Jake would think like a Catharian, that he would choose personal survival over everything else. She did not understand that humans were willing to sacrifice themselves for their friends, their families, and their ideals. Jake began to plan. The Empress wanted 3 days. He would use every hour to find a way to turn the Empire's greatest strength against itself. He started by offering to help with more technical problems around the station. Each time he learned more about how Catharian systems worked. They were beautiful and efficient, but they all depended on central control. On the second day, the Empress summoned him again. "Have you considered my offer?" she asked. "I have," Jake said, "but I have some questions about the technical aspects." The Empress seemed pleased by his apparent interest. She showed him genetic compatibility charts, explained the process of hybrid development, and described the enhanced abilities their children would possess. Jake listened and asked intelligent questions while mentally cataloging every piece of information. The more she explained, the more he understood how the Catharian system really worked. Everything connected to everything else, including the genetic programming that kept the population loyal to the royal family. "You seem troubled," the Empress observed. "It's a big decision," Jake said. "Life-changing, indeed, for both our species." As Jake left that meeting, he realized he had found his answer. The Empress was right. This would be life-changing for both species, just not in the way she expected. He had 1 day left to save humanity, and maybe give the Catharian people something they had never had before, the chance to choose their own destiny. But first, he had to convince an Empress that he was willing to betray his own species for personal gain, and he had to do it convincingly enough that she would give him access to the one place he needed to reach, the heart of the Empire's control system, where every important decision was made and every loyal thought was enforced. Time was running out, and Jake Morrison was about to attempt the most dangerous con game in human history. Jake stood before the crystal throne, trying to look like a man who had made a difficult decision. The throne room was full of Catharian nobles, all watching to see what the primitive human would choose. "Your Majesty," Jake said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I accept your offer. I will become your consort and help you build a new dynasty." The Empress smiled with genuine pleasure. "Excellent choice, Jake Morrison. You will not regret this decision." Jake hoped she was wrong about that. General Vextar stepped forward from the crowd of nobles. "Your Majesty, I must protest. This alliance with a lesser species endangers the purity of the royal bloodline. Your concerns are noted and dismissed." The Empress replied coldly. "Jake has proven his worth. The ceremony will take place tomorrow evening." "Ceremony?" Jake asked. "The bonding ritual," the Empress explained. "It will link our genetic patterns and grant you access to all areas of the Imperial Palace. You will become part of the Empire's command structure." "Perfect. That was exactly what Jake needed." "I'm honored," he said. "Is there anything I should know about the ritual?" "You will need to place your hand on the central codex," the Empress said. "It will scan your genetic pattern and integrate you into our security system. After that, every door in the Empire will recognize you as royal family." The central codex. Jake had heard that name whispered by the palace staff. It was the master computer that controlled every system in the Catharian Empire. And tomorrow he would have direct access to it. "I look forward to it," Jake said. As the court session ended, General Vextar approached him. The other nobles moved away, sensing danger. "Human," the general said quietly, "you think you have won something. But royal consorts who disappoint the Empress have very short lifespans." "Thanks for the warning," Jake replied. "I'll try not to disappoint her." "You will fail," Vextar said with certainty. "And when you do, I will personally escort you to the airlock." That night, Jake worked feverishly in his chambers. Using components he had borrowed from repair work around the station, he built a small device that looked like a simple diagnostic tool. Actually, it was a virus delivery system. Not the kind that destroyed computers, but the kind that gave access to everyone instead of just a few people. Jake had studied the Catharian system for days. It was brilliantly designed, but had one fatal flaw. It assumed that only authorized users would ever touch it. There were no safeguards against someone with legitimate access making unauthorized changes. The device was crude by Catharian standards, built from spare parts and held together with improvised connections. But it would only need to work for a few seconds. The next evening, the throne room was decorated for the bonding ritual. Thousands of candles floated in the air without visible support, and alien music filled the chamber with harmonies that made Jake's skin tingle. The Empress wore robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. She looked beautiful and terrible, like a goddess preparing to remake the universe. "Jake Morrison," she announced to the assembled court. "Step forward and join your destiny to mine." Jake walked toward the throne, his heart pounding. In his pocket, the virus device felt heavier than it should. The central codex was revealed as the crystal throne split apart. Inside was a column of pure light surrounded by flowing data streams. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing Jake had ever seen. "Place your hand here," the Empress instructed, pointing to a glowing section of the column. Jake reached out slowly. This was it, the moment that would determine whether humanity lived or died. His hand touched the light. Immediately, data flooded through his nervous system. He saw the entire Catharian Empire laid out like a map. 12 star systems, millions of ships, billions of citizens, all connected to this single point of control. And he saw something else. The genetic programming that kept every Catharian loyal to the royal family. Tiny modifications to their brain. Chemistry that made them incapable of questioning authority or thinking independently. The entire population had been turned into willing slaves, while the scanning process continued. Jake slipped his virus device against the base of the column. No one noticed the small addition among all the flowing lights and data streams. "The bonding is complete," the Empress announced. "Jake Morrison is now part of the royal family, with all the privileges and responsibilities that entails." The assembled nobles cheered, though Jake suspected many of them would have preferred to see him thrown out an airlock. As they left the throne room, the Empress took his arm. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Different," Jake said truthfully. He could sense the vast network of the Empire flowing around him like a river of information. "You now have access to any system in the Empire," the Empress said. "Ships, weapons, communication networks, even the genetic modification facilities. Use this power wisely." "I will," Jake promised. What the Empress did not know was that Jake's virus was already spreading through the network. It would take a few hours to reach every system, but when it did, something unprecedented would happen. Every Catharian citizen would suddenly be able to access the same information that had been restricted to the royal family. They would learn about their own genetic programming. They would discover that they had been slaves without knowing it, and they would finally be able to choose their own path. The next morning, reports began flooding in from across the empire. Citizens were accessing restricted databases, asking questions that had never been asked before, and making decisions without waiting for approval from their superiors. "What is happening?" the Empress demanded as her advisors brought increasingly urgent reports. "Unknown malfunction in the central systems," one advisor reported. "All access restrictions have been removed. Every citizen can now view royal-level information." The Empress turned to Jake with narrowed eyes. "Did you do this?" "I don't understand," Jake said, trying to look confused. "How could I have done anything? I just put my hand where you told me to." But the Empress was too intelligent to be fooled for long. "Show me your quarters, now." In Jake's room, she quickly found the spare components he had used to build the virus device. Her face went completely cold. "You clever little primitive," she said softly. "You used the bonding ceremony to plant a virus in my systems." "I solved a problem," Jake said. "Your people were slaves and didn't know it. Now they can choose freedom." "Freedom?" The Empress laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do you know what freedom means for a species like the Catharians? War, chaos, the destruction of everything we have built." "Maybe. Or maybe they'll surprise you." More reports came in throughout the day. Instead of chaos, something unexpected was happening. Catharian citizens were organizing themselves, forming councils, and working together to solve problems. They were not destroying their civilization. They were transforming it. "Impossible," the Empress whispered as she read the reports. "Humans learned democracy a long time ago," Jake said. "Maybe Catharians can learn it too." But even as he spoke, alarms began sounding throughout the station. General Vextar was making his move, using the confusion to seize control of the military. All royal family members are to be detained for their own protection. The general's voice echoed through the corridors. The empire will be restored to proper order. The Empress looked at Jake with something that might have been respect. You have destroyed my empire, Jake Morrison. I hope you can live with the consequences. Outside, the sound of marching feet grew louder. Vextar's soldiers were coming, and Jake was about to discover whether his faith in democracy could survive a military coup. The doors to the Empress's chambers burst open. General Vextar entered with a squad of armed soldiers, their weapons already powered and ready to fire. Your Majesty, Vextar said with false courtesy, I am here to protect you from the human terrorist who has infected our systems. Stand down, General, the Empress commanded. I gave no order for armed intervention. With respect, Your Majesty, you are no longer capable of making such decisions. The human has clearly compromised your judgment. Jake watched the standoff between the two aliens. The Empress had absolute authority, but Vextar had the guns. It was a classic power struggle that could only end one way. The human will be executed immediately, Vextar continued. Then we will restore the proper order to the Empire. You forget yourself, General, the Empress said coldly. I am still your ruler. Not anymore. Vextar raised his weapon, but before he could fire, alarms began sounding throughout the station. A new voice came over the communication system. This is Commander Amy Blake of the Human Fleet. We have entered Catharian space with a diplomatic escort. We request immediate contact with our ambassador. Jake felt a surge of hope. His friends had come for him. Impossible, Vextar snarled. Our sensors show no human ships. But more voices joined Amy's broadcast. Catharian voices from across the Empire speaking words that had never been heard before. Citizens of the Catharian Empire, one voice said, we have learned the truth about our genetic programming. We have been slaves without knowing it, but now we can choose our own destiny. The military coup by General Vextar is illegal, another voice added. We call upon all loyal citizens to resist his attempt to restore tyranny. The royal family will be protected, a third voice announced. But the Empire will become a democracy where every citizen has a voice. Vextar's soldiers looked uncertain. These were not the voices of rebels or enemies. These were their own people, speaking with newfound clarity and purpose. Sir, one soldier said to Vextar, these orders, should we really be arresting the Empress? You will follow my commands, Vextar snapped. I am your superior officer. Actually, the soldier replied slowly, according to the information we just received, you're not. Military command comes from the people now, not from individual generals. Jake watched as understanding dawned in the soldier's eyes. The genetic programming that had made him blindly obey authority was gone. For the first time in his life, he could think for himself. One by one, the other soldiers came to the same realization. They lowered their weapons and stepped away from Vextar. This is mutiny, the general said desperately. No, the lead soldier replied. This is freedom. More reports came in over the communication system. Across the Empire, Catharian citizens were choosing their own leaders, organizing their own governments, and working together in ways that had never been possible before. And they were not choosing chaos, they were choosing cooperation. How? The Empress asked Jake quietly. How did you know they would not destroy everything? Because that's what humans do when we're free, Jake said. We work together to solve problems. I figured Catharians might be the same way if they got the chance. Commander Amy's voice came through the speakers again. Jake, if you can hear this, we're docking with the station now. Dr. Lisa Park has some very interesting information about Catharian biology that you should hear. A few minutes later, Amy burst into the chambers with Dr. Park and Admiral Carter. They stopped short when they saw the Empress and the disarmed soldiers. Jake? Amy said carefully. What's the situation here? It's complicated, Jake replied. The Empress offered to make me her consort so we could create a hybrid dynasty. General Vextar tried to stage a coup, and I may have accidentally started a democratic revolution across 12 star systems. Admiral Carter stared at him. You've been here less than a week. I work fast, Jake said. Dr. Park stepped forward with a data pad.
Jake, what I discovered about Catharian genetics changes everything.
They're not just compatible with human DNA. They're designed to be compatible with multiple species. What does that mean? The Empress asked. It means your ancestors were genetic collectors, Dr. Park explained. They absorbed useful traits from other species and then eliminated the source populations. But the process was never completed with humans because we found you first. The Empress was silent for a long moment. You're saying my entire bloodline is built on genocide? Selective breeding and species elimination, Dr. Park confirmed. It's all in your own historical records once you know how to read them. Jake watched the Empress process this information. Everything she had believed about her people's superiority was based on theft and murder. Your Majesty, Amy said carefully, the Catharian citizens we've been in contact with want to offer you a choice. I'm listening. They want you to become their first elected leader. Not as an absolute ruler, but as someone who guides the transition to democracy. You know the systems, you understand the challenges, and despite everything, they still respect you. The Empress laughed bitterly. They want the former tyrant to teach them freedom? They want someone they trust to help them learn, Jake said. Someone who cares about their welfare even if she went about it the wrong way. And what about you, Jake Morrison? Do you still want to be my consort? Jake looked at her seriously. Not as a consort, but maybe as a friend helping another friend figure out what democracy looks like for a star-spanning civilization. The Empress studied his face for a long moment. You would help me after what I threatened to do to your people? That's what humans do. We help people who want to change for the better. General Vextar, who had been silent during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. This is all madness. The Empire needs strong leadership, not the chaos of democracy. General, the Empress said firmly, you are relieved of command. Report to the new civilian authorities for reassignment. You cannot, actually I can. That's one advantage of being the last absolute ruler. I get to choose how to give up power. 6 months later, Jake stood in what had once been the throne room. The crystal throne was gone, replaced by a simple podium where elected representatives from all 12 star systems met to discuss policy. Empress Ziravel, now simply called President Ziravel, was addressing the assembly about trade agreements with the human colonies. She had won the first empire-wide election by a landslide, campaigning on a platform of gradual reform and interspecies cooperation. The motion passes, she announced after the vote. The Human-Catharian Trade Alliance is now official. Jake watched from the visitors' gallery as Amy approached the podium to sign the historic agreement. Admiral Carter had been right. This had turned out much better than anyone expected. After the session, Ziravel joined Jake outside the assembly building. The station had been renamed New Democracy Station, and the view from the observation deck showed ships from dozens of species coming and going peacefully. Any regrets? Jake asked. About giving up absolute power? No, Ziravel smiled. About not making you my consort? Perhaps a few. The galaxy is a big place, Jake said. Plenty of room for friendship without genetic manipulation. Indeed, and plenty of problems that need solving. A message arrived on Jake's communication device. It was from Admiral Carter, offering him a new assignment as an ambassador to another alien species that had just made contact. More diplomatic work? Ziravel asked, reading over his shoulder. Looks like it. The Zephyrians have some interesting ideas about collective consciousness that are making everyone nervous. Sounds like they need someone who specializes in impossible situations. Jake grinned. What can I say? I like a challenge. As he prepared to leave for his next assignment, Jake looked back at the station one more time. The Catharian Empire had become the Catharian Republic. A military dictatorship had become a democracy. And an alien empress who had wanted him in her bed had become a friend who preferred him as an ally. Not bad for a week's work. The shuttle carrying Jake to his next adventure disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind a galaxy that was just a little bit more free than it had been before. And in the halls of New Democracy Station, former subjects continued learning how to be citizens, one vote at a time. Democracy, it turned out, was humanity's most successful export. Even when delivered by accident by an engineer who just wanted to fix things, some problems, Jake reflected as he reviewed files on the Zephyrians, were worth solving. Even when they led to more problems that needed solving, that was what made life interesting.